Device pixel ratio. You can see it on the screen already, actually. If you imagine these as the representatives of each screen, and you see the amount of squares you have them, all of them are squares, the perfect squares, so they are equally as tall as wide. Even if you believe them to be different when you watch the screen, slightly wider than they are tall or something like that, it doesn't really matter. Please, they intended for all intents, intention and purposes. These are going to be perfect squares. Now, if you look at the PPI, resolution, physical size, you see there are things to think about. Physical size and resolution are two separate things. When you compare them together, you get pixel per inch, you get calculations. Calculations means trouble because you got to take them into consideration. Now, we, of course, have had this issue for a long time. First, it was with printing. And then this came up when Apple first presented their first Retina screen, which was a different amount of PPI than all the other ones, the previous ones. Since then, that has happened for like many, many different devices, of course. So that was like the boom, the start of it all. And I think that when I say that when Apple presented the Retina thing, it's way back. So of course, the industry has had time to address this. And for example, if you're talking about screens right now, there's something called DPR, device pixel ratio. So when I say something like in CSS 10 pixels, I don't have to use pixels in CSS, in fact, but not when I write units. But I want to keep this, you get to keep this in mind. When I write units in CSS, whatever I use, if I use rem or em, or even if you use physical sizes of inches, centimeters, so on, which I can do, I never do, but I could. And then we have all these different things we could do also as well, like percentage and so on. The end result is always calculated into pixels. So whatever I use from my own intensive, like the facilitation of my workflow, the web browser, when they read it, then translate whatever I wrote into pixels. It does so dynamically every time I change the screen size, if it's a dynamic value, or otherwise it's always going to be fixed value. With that said, what we can say that is always there, it's a CSS pixel. And I'm going to call it a CSS pixel because that is the value here. It's not that the pixel is going to be the same for all of them, because we are going to treat different pixels as different sizes. So they're not going to be the same because, of course, as you understand, when I've showed you in PPI in the previous lesson, that there are going to be a different amount of pixels can be part of 1 inch. You know, it has to, by default, the physical size then has to be different. If 1 inch is always 1 inch, but you could have 300 pixels within it or 72. The only thing that then can change is the size of a pixel. See? Because the inch stays fixed. So how the screens treat that size difference is called DPR. The ratio in which it treats it is called DPR. Stands for device pixel ratio. So for example, you can see there we have 2 equal size squares. You can imagine them as being inches. And these are the highlighted white squares. And if you place them on top of one another, you would see that they are perfectly the same. But the representation for what how many pixels are represented within each one of them is different. So for example, there's going to be 2 DPR in the desktop and then 4.3 DPR amount of the pixels within that square in this mobile phone. So instead of using inches, which is really impractical when you have everything digital, you convert it into so-called device pixel ratio. When you think about that, we're going to talk about the implications of this. I think an example is in order. I'm in here in Dalarna University, their website, and I'm going to just right click on it and use inspect, which is on the bottom of this menu I get. And then I get to inspect it. I can look at HTML and CSS and whatever is written in there. But also, if I have this thing at the very top here, which is this features some kind of laptop and mobile phone just in front of it. When I click on that, I get this screen, which I can resize and look at how it responsively changes. And it's going to be very useful for you in this course, of course. And then I get a couple of other measurements. And if I use Chrome, I get these. If I use different versions of Chrome, I might get others. If I go to Mozilla Firefox, I will get one more, which is called device pixel ratio, which we're just talking about. But I can also see device pixel ratio in this one. The only thing I need to do is go into this one. And then let's say these are presets, like if I want to go to, for example, let's say I want to go to look at how Samsung Galaxy S9 would look on the Dalarna Universe would look on that device, and you see it over here. I'm not going to look at this one. It doesn't really matter. I can keep it responsive up there. What I need to look at is I go to the bottom here and edit and see what measurements have been put on it. So if I go in here and I select it and I click on this edit, you see this is the amount of pixels on the width, the height. It says what kind of device it is. But what is this? 3.5. That's the device pixel ratio. So in fact, if I were to say compare these, I want to keep these values in mind. Let's us all keep these values in mind. You could I'll do what I did last time. I'm going to open up screen and I'm going to just walk over the layers. I think I have placed them over here. I don't. Yeah, over there. So let's go ahead and look at this. So I'm going to take this text and I'm going to write whatever it was, 412, 846. So 412, 846, and then 3.5. That's the values we want to keep in mind. I'll keep them in mind, and I'll go ahead and I'll look at another device. So let's say I'm going to look at devices again. I'm going to look at HDMI 2K. That's going to 2K. Okay. So I have no value out here. It says desktop, it says no value. When I have no value, it is equal to 1 DPR. So 2048, 1080, let's keep that in mind. And sorry for jumping over there, I should be here. And then we have 2048, the width. And let's keep on doing this. 2048, 1080, was it? I don't know. And then 1. Just going to double check here. Yeah, it was. So we have these. Now, if we really want to know, so that they keep them same, I think we should convert these into being 1 pixel DPRs, then we know how much resolution there actually is there in this one compared to the other. So let's do it. We say on the width here, so we had 846. Let me bring up the calculator because I cannot do this in my head. 846 times 3.5. Now that's 2,961 in its height. Now, if you make the orientation of the phone landscape, which make it tilt and be shorter height, you notice that it's actually a larger number than the 2K device. So you have more pixels actually. And if you look at 412, then let's do that as well. 412 times 3.5, you get 1,442, which is a larger number if you have it tilted in a desktop layout, larger than that's one's height. You did both these numbers that we just calculated were more pixels actually on this mobile device, even though it's old, than a 2K device. Now, if you look at a newer version of this is going to be a larger number. So the device pixel ratio, the amount of pixels in it, is going to be more today than it was when that Samsung S9 Plus was released. Talking about that, now you can see that even though we have a smaller device, we can pack more pixels into it. With that said, I think I'm not going to jump over to the next video immediately because I think we can deal with it within the scope of this one, because this one is a small thing. Orientation, I just mentioned it, and I'm going to mention it again. It's called landscape or portrait. When you're watching desktop, of course, you might tilt the screen. Some people that code a lot, they have two tilted screens and one normal screen just to be able to view code, because you can get it. It's easy to read things when they're less, when you don't have to read them across the whole screen. So you tilt the screen so you can read more from top to bottom, like you have a paper. So it's easier to read code that way. And then they have one screen to visualize it. Now, that is, in effect, exactly what we need to think about right now. How do we usually watch things? We usually watch mobile phone one way, but sometimes we watch a movie and you tilt it and you see the landscape. So it's much more common to tilt a mobile phone than we do ever tilt desktops. But we need to take this into consideration. So the orientation matters when we are making things responsive, because you're going to fit more things on the width when you tilt a phone in landscape than if you have it on portrait. And of course, the browser knows, because it's going to know whether you tilted the phone or not. Now, with all of that said, I think we can close off this chapter of media devices and know for sure it's going to impact the way we use images or layout, because knowing that we can pack more or less, or see more or less detail, is of course central to working responsively with, not responsibly, but responsively, even though that is responsibly to do with web design. Thank you very much, and I see you in the next video.